Who are my favorite writers? I mean, I love loads of writers, and I think there are positive influences and negative influences. The positive ones are things I like to read and everything those writers do. I love and appreciate it, and I try to emulate it in some way. So I think of writers like Malcolm Hulke and James Baldwin and Toni Morrison um, Emily Dickinson as a poet. I Whereas negative influences for me is, I mean, the most positive negative influence for me is Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace. I have a lot of problems with that book, and in a way, like everything I've done has been some kind of counterpoint to that. But I like lots of writers. You know, it's a prerogative for a writer to like lots of writers, I think. Martha came about because I needed a project to do for my master's in creative writing. That's why it was purely by necessity. And I wasn't doing the modular MA, I was doing the independent project master's. And I was snooping around for a project which would keep me interested for a year, which was how long it was going to be. And I wanted to do something. I mean, Martha is an attempt to make sense of the political divisions that tore my friend groups apart. Basically, that was the first part of it, and the second part of it was being a foreigner living in the UK and trying to define the United Kingdom for myself, trying to make sense of it. So it was a two-pronged attack, and so I wrote one novel called Mr. Limousine Lost Her Hat, which was all about corrupt politicians in Westminster and kind of hijacking the LGBTQ plus civil rights movement for political ends, which were quite nasty. So I wrote that, and that book was too short, and so I wrote another book about hallucinogenic cannabis in an independent Scotland, and so that was quite Philip K. Dicky, and that book was too short too. And then I thought, well, hold up, both these books are kind of about the same topics. And they take place in the same universe, so to speak. Kind of in the future in 2089. And I figured, why not combine them? And so that was what I did. And that majority of that year was spent combining the two novels in a kind of mad rush of, kind of draft after draft after draft, and smoothing it out, and doing kind of a tone poem type novel. So that was how Martha came about in the beginning. I think I write about the UK, despite my being Bermudian, partially because Bermuda is in the British Commonwealth, it's a British territory. And I had a very similar experience to lots of West Indians, for example, who came over to the UK during the 60s. I came here, I'd been told my whole life that, it was intimated anyway, that I was British, and that, Great Britain was great, and that I had the possibility to be great as well. And so I came over here to finish high school. I went to Marlborough College in Wiltshire, which is a beautiful part of the country. And when I got here and actually lived here, because it was a boarding school, I very quickly realized that I was not as English as I thought I was, and there were several people who were quite happy to tell me that I was not. So suddenly you have an identity crisis on your hands, which is exactly what West Indians went through when they came to, people like Michael de Freitas, who came to the UK. So what do? I think when writers get depressed, they write books. I started out writing poetry, but it wasn't really, I didn't really deal with my resentments, and mostly they were resentments with the country, until I wrote Martha. And that was the whole reason for the genesis of the project, really. I had all these demons in me. I had to get rid of them somehow, and I think writing is a lot healthier than drinking yourself to death, so I chose the writing. The hardest part of writing Martha was the fact that at the beginning I was very adamant on writing a novel about modern sexuality. And within about a month I realized that I couldn't write about modern sexuality without writing about politics. And so it very quickly became a political novel. And I think writers have human beings in general, going back to the division, splitting up my friend groups, I think, people have a tendency when they do talk about important topics like, I don't know, the rights of gay people, it's very easy to become biased, whether fairly or unfairly. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to write an unbiased, a novel which was as objective as possible. And of course, I think complete objectivity is a stupid idea. You're not going to get that. But I wanted to create a very balanced book, um, which was fair, because I think that's the only way you can get any approximation of the truth. And I didn't want to make it a firebrand novel, and I don't think it is one. And neither do I think it's inflammatory, and it's precisely for that reason that I took the time to really think about stuff like transgender rights, um, and this whole idea of migrants coming to a country, becoming politicians themselves, and then becoming as intolerant as the politicians who would have treated them scornfully when they first arrived in the country. That to me was a fascinating idea. you know so yeah, that was the hardest part about writing Martha. It was just kind of making it balanced, and not making it inflammatory or nasty, because I think there are lots of books like that, and I didn't want to do that at all. I think there's a difference between becoming a better writer and growing as a writer. I think when it comes to becoming a better writer, you're improving your style and your form, and perhaps even your emotional sensibilities. Whereas if you grow, I think you become more open minded. I think I grew more from Martha than I became a better writer. I became extremely open minded towards lots of different concepts because of Martha, and I think for that, as an experience, it was invaluable. Um, but how did Martha change me as a writer? Not much. I think, for example, my second novel, which I'm writing now, is Nakadai Notes. I think that book has changed me a lot more as a writer than Martha ever did, or was possible of doing. For the simple reason that when I came around to writing my second novel, I knew how to write a novel, and I understood that there were certain stages you undertook, whereas when I started writing Martha, I didn't have a clue. Um, and I think that was one of the great things in its favor, was that I didn't know what I was doing. And I think that's absolutely essential for young writers, to grow, and to become better writers.